So basically, before addressing the assignment for this panel, I wanted to begin by addressing what I will call the elephant in the room. Why large classes in the first place? If we all agree that the one-on-one tutorial is the most effective way to teach a subject, we might ask ourselves why the mass-produced model for education. Is it that some courses are more complicated than others, so it can be taught only in small groups, or is it that some subjects are so easy or of less importance that they can be delivered in a mass production model? Might it be also that institutions of higher learning find themselves either stuck with or addicted to what I would call the Tailoress model of pedagogy? Efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. How many students can we fit in a classroom becomes the driving force behind our teaching model. When I was the chair of the English department here at Murray State, a recurrent issue we faced was how to increase enrollment in the composition courses. We taught 2 then instead of just 1. We had used for years the excuse that we couldn't add students because there were only 25 computers in a room. Why not just add more computers, was the response. Fortunately for us, that was not possible. And even more fortunately, the national data and the professional organizations were unanimous in advocating smaller classes for effective teaching of writing. We now have a maximum enrollment for English 105 of 22 students. This should make us hopeful, I guess. Maybe the Tailoress model can be countered after all. The evidence, however, is not overwhelming. I teach Hum to 11, the general humanities course required of all MSU students. There are 70 students in my class. Just to be clear, faculty have the choice of teaching either 2 35-student classes or 1 70-student class. I prefer to teach a work of literature once, not twice in the same day. I teach my 70-student class in Faculty Hall 208, the largest classroom in the building, and one of only 2 or 3 the college has available for such a large group. Several years ago, the Humanities Committee decided that each instructor could identify a particular thematic approach to the subject. For several years, my theme was the politics of love. But I realized 2 things rather quickly. 1, most students are far too young to know much about love. And 2, most students are far too young to know much about love, think they know everything about the subject, and can't understand what they could possibly learn from reading literature. So a few years ago, I decided to focus on living the ethical life. Let me take this opportunity to finally address the impetus behind this panel, some specific strategies for being successful with a large class. Lesson 1, select a topic that might resonate with the students. Keep in mind, of course, I'm talking about one discipline here, and that is the humanities. And at Murray State, that pretty much means literature and philosophy. You might ask, why is identifying a compelling theme more important for a large class than a smaller class? The answer, ironically, brings me back to what I've been saying all along. It seems that with some disciplines, the size of the classroom dictates the pedagogical approach. While I'm not suggesting that a smaller class allows one to focus on a boring, irrelevant topic, I am suggesting that the necessity for the professor to keep the topic interesting is exacerbated in a larger group. Let me be specific. Believe it or not, the fact that the chairs in a larger lecture hall do not move is a factor in making the class more engaged. When I taught 35 students in a smaller room, a room that had desks with chairs that can be brought together in small circles, I could create small learning communities of students who pondered the same questions and shared their ideas with the entire class. In FH 208, that option does not exist. That said, let me return to some additional comments on teaching students something about living an ethical life. What I like about the topic is that it allows me to address exactly what I began my presentation with today. If learning the humanities is so crucial for an undergraduate, and living an ethical life is central to the life of the community, the nation, the world, why is it that students are required to take only 1 humanities course? Some colleges require 4, for example, and Murray State used to require a minimum of 2. And why is it that this invaluable class has 70 students in it, or even 35 in the smallest classes? And why is it that the only way many students learn anything beyond the pulpit about what it means to be an ethical human being occurs in 1 class, and that one just by happenstance? I mean, other themes that are taught are the family, monsters, authority, the test, and the quest. The students' initial response to my insight about this is a profound silence, a look of consternation and doubt. I think that's a great place to start. For me, that's what the humanities should do. Ask the difficult questions, confront students on their underlying assumptions, provoke them to think beyond the platitudes they love to mouth with great assurance as if they're an original and profound insight. Maybe that's lesson number 2. Come to class prepared with not only an overview of what they have read, but with leading questions posed by the text. The challenge here is to generate discussion, to invite students into the conversation, and not be too worried about right answers, which brings me back to how teaching 70 students in a lecture hall differs from teaching 35 in a classroom with movable desks. Lesson number 3. I use the whiteboard a lot in my classes, taking notes from what students have to say, giving each response serious consideration, and trying hard not to censor anyone, no matter how ludicrous the comment might be. At the same time, students are required to locate their comments in the reading. They don't have to cite page numbers, etc., but they can't just bullshit their way through a discussion. I try to set aside enough time for students to share their vapid opinions if that's what it takes to get discussion started. But I don't let it go on interminably, and I bring it all back to the day's assignment. The challenge, I think, is to be able to let the conversation go where it goes for a while, to not be so rigid that you have to be in control all the time. I find it is frequently in the unexpected that the most learning takes place. Related to this might be lesson number 4. You don't have to know everything. It's okay to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. I frequently and genuinely tell a student, that's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought of that. I also think out loud in class, ponder what a student has offered in conversation with not only the student who spoke up, but other students in the room. I invite students into the discussion, not overtly by calling on a taciturn student, but generally by rephrasing the ideas, asking them for assistance understanding the issues, treating them as peers rather than as passive recipients of my wisdom. I chaired the English department here for several years, and when asked about what I thought it took to be an effective chair, I'd like to say, you're going to love this, the combined qualities of a used car salesman and a stand-up comic. It may be that those same qualities are what it takes to be an effective teacher in a large class, at least when the subject is something as amorphous as the humanities. Thank you.